So, you want to find your purpose. Easy, right? Just follow your dreams. Just think back to what you loved doing as a child and do that now. And if money were no object, what would you be doing? Just do that. That all sounds great, right? Except, what if you have no idea what your dreams are? What if you think back to your childhood and you didn't have some big dream as a child other than being a pony? And if money were no object, I think we would all be sitting on a beach, and that can't be all of our purpose, right? So this all sounds like great advice, except when it doesn't work. Then how do you find your purpose? This can be really frustrating. You've just woken up from sleepwalking through a career that you hate, and now you want to find your purpose and move on to a more happy and fulfilling life. The only problem is that your purpose is nowhere to be found. And you may wish that someone could just tell you what to do next. You wish someone could just tell you what your purpose is. Maybe a fortune teller, maybe an astrologer, maybe a tarot reader, maybe a human design analyst. Maybe one of them will have the answers and can just tell you what to do next. Unfortunately, it just doesn't work this way, and you should probably run in the other direction from anyone who tells you that they can figure out your purpose for you. Because the truth is that they don't know you. Only you are the expert of your own life, and how could someone who's known you for an hour possibly have the answers to your whole life when you've known yourself for your whole life? And what I really mean is finding your path of purpose, because your purpose is not a destination, it's a journey. As cliche as that sounds. So the first step in finding your purpose is realizing that you don't find your purpose. You find the first step and you have the courage to take that first step and you slowly walk your path of purpose. So all you really have to find is that first step, and then you just have to be brave enough to take that first step and the step after that and the step after that. And the way that you find that first step is by tuning in to those quiet whispers of your heart. And what I'm talking about in this video is also really great for those of you that just feel a little bit lost in life, even if you're not necessarily trying to find your purpose and you don't really want to undergo that grand path at this time. It's a great way when you're just feeling stuck and a little lost as well. And so the first thing to understand about these quiet whispers is that they aren't the kind of unrelenting nagging of your mind that says, find your purpose, find your purpose. And they aren't the swirling vortex of ideas that may be swirling around in your head that lead to a lot of confusion and doubt and just anxiety about which path to choose. And so you're probably in one of two camps. You either have completely lost touch with hearing those kind of quiet nudges from your heart, from your soul, from your inner being, your higher self, whatever you like to think of, and you just have no idea. Or you may be in the other camp where you kind of know what you quietly yearn for and you've just sort of been ignoring it because you're not ready, or you think it doesn't sound realistic, or you just don't think you can be successful, or whatever comes up when you think about that little knowing nudge that you've kind of been sweeping under the rug or brushing off to the side. So I'm going to try and do my best to describe the heart's path as far as I can understand it on my own journey so far. And so far, my understanding of it is really following those quiet whispers, acknowledging that they're there and starting to follow them into this path that feels like walking into the unknown. You don't really know where it's going to go. You can't see how it's going to work out, but you just know that for whatever reason, you're being called to go in that direction. And this is really a path of uncertainty and trust. And it's a path that you can't see the whole path. You can see maybe 1 or 2 steps ahead, and you just have to trust that you're being called to go in that direction for some reason. And so if there's an area of your life or an idea that you have that feels like you're being called, but the path is so unclear, all you can see is the first step, that may be the path that you're being called to go down, and that may be the path of your purpose. And this is so contrary to how we are kind of brought up to approach our life. We're taught to have a 5-year plan. We're taught to have all the steps. We're taught to have everything figured out and to not have any uncertainty and to be able to know exactly what we're doing when and have everything planned out. And so there's some mindset shifts that are required if you're willing to take this path into the unknown because you're wanting to live your purpose. So the first mindset that you need to embrace if you're willing to try to walk down this path is that of trust and faith that things will work out, and surrender to the unknown and to, whatever higher consciousness, higher purpose that you believe in, surrendering to the universe and trusting that it's got your back and everything is going to work out. And I get it. This can sound so difficult and airy-fairy and like, what are you talking about? It's so uncomfortable to have uncertainty in our lives and not have everything figured out. And there's so much pressure from society to have a plan and have everything figured out and to be able to explain yourself and have everything make sense. I get it. And the way that I have really learned to embrace this mindset and this attitude of trust is by looking back on my life at times where it felt like nothing was going right, and also reflecting on how those situations eventually worked themselves out, and realizing that everything has worked out up until this point, and to start to have gratitude and let those experiences build my belief and my trust in the process. And so I have a couple examples that I can share with you. If you've been on the channel for a while, you probably already know that I was laid off back in 2016. This was a pretty scary and uncertain time for me. I, at the time, had a lot of financial responsibilities. I had a mortgage on a small condo. I had car payments. I still had student loans. And these are the types of things that you don't really want to miss a payment on. And so I had some money, but I didn't have like a year's worth of money. I didn't even have 6 months worth of money that I would be able to use while I was job hunting. And it came down to kind of the last minute, but eventually a job did come along that I was the perfect fit for on paper, and I interviewed and I ended up getting that job just in time when I was to the point where I was really worried about running out of money. Another example comes from around that time of my life where I had accepted a new job, and this is the dream job that I've talked about previously on my channel. And this job would require that I moved 12 hours across the country. And I was moving to Vancouver, Canada, which, if any of you know, has a very competitive rental market. And so when I made this move, I had a month to pack everything up, get to Vancouver, figure out where to live. And at the same time, I was selling my condo. So a lot of things had to fall into place at kind of the right time in order for me to close out on the condo, get my stuff out so that the new people could get in, but also have an apartment to move into when I got to Vancouver with all my stuff. And I remember this time every week my manager would come into the office and would say, like, did you find a place yet? Did you find a place yet? Because it's just so competitive, and you show up to any open house and there's like a lineup of people out the door. And so this was a pretty uncertain time, but again, everything fell into place just in time. I found an apartment that I loved, and my condo closed, and I was able to move all my stuff, drive across the country, and get everything into the new apartment just in time that I didn't have to put anything into storage or anything like that. And so it's reflecting on these experiences that can start to give you the faith that everything ends up working out in the end, even if it doesn't really work out the way you had hoped or had initially intended. Eventually you do get there. And another thing that's important to remember, and it's kind of common self-help advice that you'll hear, is that we really do set the destination. We put in the order and we say to the universe, like, this is where I want to go, this is what I want, but it's not really our job to say how those things will work out. And if you can really start to learn to get into the trust and flow, then things can work out even better than you expected. And so the next thing to embrace to help you start to walk down this path and get clarity on what exactly to do next and to start to tune in to those silent whispers of your heart is to embrace silence and stillness. If you're someone that's been thinking that you want to find your purpose and you've been kind of thinking about this for a while now, you probably have a lot of thoughts just swirling around in your head, and it may be leading to a lot of confusion and chatter and noise, and maybe you've been spending a lot of time on YouTube and Googling things and just generally like consuming a lot of information, talking to too many people to try to figure this out. And on the other hand, if you don't really know what to do next, you may not have a lot of possibilities or ideas swirling around in your head, but you may start to develop this inner monologue that's something along the lines of, I just can't figure this out. I just don't know what to do. I'm stuck. And that kind of becomes the thing that swirls around in your head and creates all the noise. And so this is why silence and stillness is so important, is when you embrace the silence, you stop thinking about it, you stop talking to everyone, you stop Googling, you stop YouTubing, and you just have a moment where you can silence your mind, then that's what allows you to be able to start to hear those quiet whispers, the quiet yearning of your heart, because it is quiet and all the anxious thoughts are much, much louder and drown out that knowing that you have. And so the stillness aspect really is, stopping the anxious activity that comes along with your anxious mind. And I remember when I was trying to find my purpose, the anxious mind was saying like, you have to figure this out. You want to quit your job. You need to know what you're doing so you can get started, blah, blah, blah. And so the anxious mind really wanted to figure things out, which would lead to all of this frenzy of activity, like the Googling or trying things and just things that kind of kept me busy because I really wanted to figure it out, but they weren't necessarily helping. The other thing where the stillness comes in for me is when you're looking to pivot, but you still have to keep up all the daily activity of your life. Like when I wanted to quit my 9-to-5 job, but I was also trying to figure out my purpose, I was kind of being torn between two worlds, right? Like I still had to show up at my job, do all that job stuff. And then on the evenings and weekends, I was trying to figure out what my actual purpose was or how to move forward. And so it's really difficult sometimes to get that clarity when you're so caught up being busy in what you're currently doing. And so this is something that I did more recently. You may have noticed that I took a little break at the end of last year from YouTube and I didn't post for a couple months. And for me, that was really, I needed that stillness and the silence away from what I was currently doing on YouTube because I just had this feeling that something just wasn't quite right. And if I kept up the process of like producing videos, my mindset was always going to be kind of where it was. And I wasn't going to give myself the silence and the space that I needed to figure out like, where do I need to pivot here? Like, where is it just not feeling right? And so part of this process, when you're just sitting in silence and you're trying to be still and not take all of this anxious action, is opening yourself up to all possibilities. And this really helps get your minds off of what it may be stuck on. And so what this can look like is saying to yourself, I'm okay with whatever answer I get during this period. I'm going to take a little break. I'm going to sit in silence. I'm going to try and still my activities as much as possible. And I'm going to be open to whatever the answer might be. And this can be a little bit scary because sometimes we are really hooked into a certain path that things have to go, or we're hooked into a certain way of doing things. And either consciously or subconsciously, you think that that's kind of the only way that it can work. And that can keep you stuck on a path that just isn't working. And so really being open to saying like, I'm going to be okay if the answer that I get is to tear it all down or to completely stop doing what I'm doing and do something new. And you have to be okay with that. And so when I took my little YouTube break, it was really trying to be open to like, maybe I don't do YouTube anymore. Maybe it's completely something else, or maybe I'm just changing the way that I do it or the content, whatever. It's just being open to being okay with a completely different answer than you were expecting, and really not hanging on to this idea in your head that's like, in the back of your mind, you're like, I'm going to be open. But then in the back of your mind, you're still thinking, but it'll probably be, what I'm already doing. The answer will probably just be what I'm already doing. So it's really not hanging on to any sort of predetermined outcome. And I know that you may be sitting there thinking, like, this sounds crazy. I know the struggle. I know how society really wants us to be productive and to always be doing things and to not just be sitting around, waiting for clarity to come. And so there's a lot of, external pressure not to do a process like this. And I think one way to think about it is that this is not going to be forever. You're not going to be some monk on the mountaintop doing this forever. You're just taking a small break, however long that needs to be, in order to find clarity. And you're not just sitting around doing nothing. You can still do things that you enjoy, and you still have to keep up with your everyday life, of course. But it's like, maybe just take a little break from this whole cycle of trying to find your purpose, or that kind of inner monologue and the activity that goes along with it. And for me, what really helps is finding activities that allow you to silence and relax your mind. So how can you silence your mind, or how can you really embrace this stillness? And for me, this wasn't really like a typical like silent meditation or anything like that. Like, I wasn't sitting around meditating all day. It was really just taking my mind off of, finding my purpose or finding my next step or getting unstuck. It was kind of taking my mind away from that and just silencing that whole dialogue so that I could really start to tune into, what my heart or my intuition or my gut, whatever like you resonate with, was saying to me. And one thing that I really noticed is that this inner knowing is this really quiet inner knowing. And it wasn't like those little ideas that kind of jump into your head. It wasn't like a shower thoughts moment where like some brilliant idea just like jumped out of the sky and was in front of me. That's not what it was like at all. Those sorts of shower thoughts ideas are, really what give me inspiration for YouTube videos, but they weren't the types of ideas that really told me, what to do next or what my purpose was. For me, it was really just this like quiet inner knowing of, this is what I want to be doing. This is where I'm being called to go. And for me personally, it was really like, you've kind of known this all along, but you've been ignoring it up until now for whatever variety of reasons. And so that's the best that I can describe my experience, is that it's not like a brilliant, lightning strikes and I suddenly have the idea. It was more of this like quiet, like knowing inside of me that's been there this whole time, that was like, hey, look at me over here in the back. Like, are you ready to acknowledge me yet? That was more what it was like. And as crazy as it sounds, you'll kind of know you're on the right path when you can't see where that path is going, where it feels unclear, where you can see the first step, but you can't really see what comes after that. For me, that was really how I knew, like, okay, I'm really in this process of trusting, in following my intuition and following my path of purpose, and not using my analytical mind to try and figure out a path that I know all of the steps. And another thing to help you in this process is really to keep in mind that it's important to embrace all aspects of yourself, because the thing that you're being called to do may be asking you to embrace a part of yourself that you don't really acknowledge, or that you kind of keep hidden away to yourself and you haven't really shown that. And that can be really scary, to start to come out of the closet in a way with this part of yourself that you hide away, because everyone around you accepts you as you are now, with that part of you being hidden possibly. And then when you go to show that part of yourself, it's really vulnerable because you're not sure how people will react. My own example is like, if I'm shifting my content on YouTube and really embracing the kind of more spiritual side, the more woo-woo and all of these things that I have helped use to help my process in private, that I haven't really shown a lot of up until this point on YouTube, is kind of scary, because it's like, well, do you guys want this type of content? Will you guys like it? Some of you may go, some of you may stay, and it's really, I don't know. But I think for me, the biggest part is, embracing what I feel called to do so that I can be my full self and not hide these pieces of me away. And I think for me, the big realization was like, I could kind of compartmentalize these things because I was an engineer for a decade. And in my mind, it was like, well, engineers can't be into astrology. Engineers can't be into tarot and human design and all these things. They have to be like separate. Engineers are supposed to be logical and serious and things like that. And so I had really just sort of been like, I'm not interested in those things. I'm kind of casually, but like I don't take them seriously. And so now it's really just trying to embrace more of my like full set of interests and the full set of things that have helped me on my journey so that I can share those with you. And so that's something to keep in mind with your own process. Like maybe there's a part of you that's saying, hey, look at me over here. Like I'm your purpose, embrace me. But you're like not used to embracing that part of yourself. Keep in mind that that could be holding you back as well. And one way to think about this is, people see us for what we show them, and you'll get invitations or job offers or, projects to work on based on what you're putting out there. And I remember this at work when I used to be an engineer. I just felt like I wasn't expressing my full self. And so I would be like recognized at work and people would be like, oh, you're so good at this or whatever. Like, you're the person that can do this. And I was thinking like, oh, but I don't want to do that work. I want to do this other work that like none of you know about. And so none of you can really like invite me to do that work. Or, I don't have access to those projects because that's just not how others see me. And so that's something to keep in mind. Like if there's work that you want to be doing, but you're not showing that part of yourself or showing up for that work, how can you ever do those projects or get those invitations or work with those types of clients or whatever it looks like? So that is one way to start to walk your path of purpose, by following the quiet whispers of your heart and by tuning in to that inner knowing that has been there all along, just waiting for you to finally acknowledge it. And keep an eye out for another video in the next month or so. I'm going to be sharing another way that I have found helpful in starting to walk your path of purpose. And I really think that there's so many ways to slice and dice this and to approach it. And I'm hoping that by sharing a lot of the different ways that I have found that can help you start to walk your path of purpose, that one of them will resonate with you or you'll connect with it and it'll help you finally take that step forward. So if you did enjoy this video, please give it a big thumbs up. I'd really appreciate that support. And if you're into this type of content, then consider subscribing for weekly videos like this.